And to our top story now, the U.S. and Israel reached a 2-week ceasefire agreement with Iran yesterday following President Trump's threats. Iran says that this new deal may allow it to institute new fees on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, which, of course, is this crucial passageway we've all learned about recently. 20% of the world's oil travels through there. Following Israeli attacks in Beirut, Iran has closed the strait again today. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt says that the closure of the strait is, quote, unacceptable.
Case of what they're saying publicly is different privately. We have seen an uptick of traffic in the strait today, and I will reiterate the president's expectation and demand that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened immediately, quickly, and safely.
So joining me now to talk more about this is New York Congressman Dan Goldman. Thank you so much for coming back on the Rush Hour, Congressman. This story continues to change. It's hard to know what's real, what's not real. From your perspective right now, this evening, what can you tell us about this last-minute ceasefire deal and where things stand?
It was unclear to me ever that it was a deal, and if it was, or it was disastrous. I think it was more than anything some kind of off-ramp that Donald Trump could plausibly use to walk back his absolutely deranged and unhinged threats yesterday. But the problem with what he is doing is because the Iranian regime does not care about its own people, and they are perfectly willing and sometimes eager to murder tens of thousands of their own civilians, Donald Trump's threats to go after the civilians in Iran are not only counterproductive because they're pushing those Iranian people closer to the regime, but they're unproductive in that they're not forcing anything from Iran. And so this 10-point deal that he quasi-agreed to in principle is littered with things that he has said in the past and that the United States foreign policy and strategy has always said are untenable and are not going to be permitted to happen. And that includes nuclear enrichment. It includes control over the Strait of Hormuz. It includes removing all of the oil sanctions that have been very devastating to the Iranian regime. And here we are now with Iran with total control over the Strait of Hormuz, Donald Trump in the United States with very little control over much of anything. And now Iran is flexing their muscle because they were able to leverage a much, much better deal, as temporary as it may be, than they would have ever gotten before this war started. And
so now we apparently have 2 weeks before this next deadline happens, and obviously the president has continued to push this deadline forward. What is a plausible, realistic, potential off-ramp that you see could happen within the next 2 weeks to end the situation as it stands right now?
Well, I think what needs to happen is that Donald Trump needs to pack it up and go home. He needs to figure out a way that he can withdraw U.S. troops and stop this war while not conceding so many conditions that Iran wants in this 10-point plan. It is unacceptable for Iran to be permitted to enrich uranium. It is unacceptable for the United States to have no monitoring or oversight, or the international community, of their nuclear capabilities. And if that's not going to be the case, and they're not going to be able to do that because the U.S. withdraws, then there has to be the option of sanctions. There has to be much less control for Iran over the Strait of Hormuz, which is crippling our economy and raising gas prices.
Yeah, let me jump in on that. You mentioned the gas prices crippling the economy, and in New York City, gas prices are up to an average of $4.35 a gallon, which for one of the first times it's not as high as the national average. But New Yorkers, like people all over the country, are feeling the costs of this war very directly. Do you expect what can you tell people, and how do you expect that to play out for New Yorkers' wallets?
Well, I mean, it's a disaster, and it's gonna if the Strait of Hormuz, and this is important to understand, is closed off to international freight. That's not just gas prices that are going to go up. It's going to be the cost of goods that go through there regularly and routinely. The supply chain is being interrupted globally because of this war, and because Donald Trump was not prepared for the idea that Iran would, of course, retaliate in this way. And this is part of the reason, but certainly not the whole reason why it is such a terrible war. It was such a terrible idea to begin with, and that it needs to end right now. And the notion that Donald Trump would ask for $200 billion for this war as the economy continues to crater, as affordability continues to be the top of mind, as gas prices you mentioned, but rent and food and healthcare, it's unacceptable, and he's got to take us out of this right now.
You're talking about affordability and rent and so forth, so I'm going to bring it back to a much more local level on that point, being those were points that Mayor Mamdani was elected on. He's now approaching his 100th day in office, and I want to get your view on a couple things. Number one, how do you think he's doing in that role, in his role up to now? And I want to specifically home in on one campaign promise that he had made, which looks like it's going to go by the wayside. I believe you had been a supporter of his free bus promise. It looks like that's not making its way in a realistic way into the Senate and Assembly budgets in Albany that is currently being negotiated with the governor. So A, what are your thoughts on the mayor's first 100 days? And B, specifically, on the idea that free buses are unlikely to happen this year?
Yeah, he and I did work together on a pilot program for free buses. And I think my view, at least, is if you could target free buses to areas that are transit deserts, and especially are filled with people who need that public transportation to get around the city, that if you're narrowly targeting it, it is much less costly, and it really is getting at the root cause of the problem. I think there are many candidates, who make big promises. I look at Donald Trump, and he's betrayed pretty much every promise that he has made. And certainly Mayor Mamdani ran on some big ideas that are designed to tackle the problems that certainly he and I agree that this city has. It's disappointing that this one will not materialize this year, or perhaps I don't know how long. But it also just demonstrates the difficulty of governing, and why being thoughtful, pragmatic, and creative to solve problems is so important. It is easy to make big promises. It is harder to get things done. And I'll certainly continue to work with him to try to alleviate this affordability crisis that our mutual and shared constituents are suffering from right now.
Congressman Dan Goldman, I really appreciate your coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.